So there is no UFC card on this weekend, but there is going to be a PFL card taking place in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, which is called PFL MENA 2 Riyadh. So pretty much what this is it's the PFL's tournament in the Middle East. Now they have the PFL tournament, and then they have the PFL Europe tournament, and they have PFL MENA, which is the tournament but in the Middle East. So if that's not confusing, I don't know what is, but what is going to be taking place this weekend is the PFL MENA card, and this is the second card that PFL MENA is going to be putting on. It should be a pretty fun card. Now, I don't think it's necessarily going to be as high level as most PFL cards have been in the past, but there's a lot of very interesting and also very fun fighters fighting on this card as well, which I am looking forward to talking about. If you did want to sign up to We Want Picks, which is $10 per month, and you wanted to support my channel, the best way to do it is by signing up using my code ARTEM, where you can get a 3-day free trial that you can cancel at any time if you do sign up using my code ARTEM. Now, there is no UFC on this weekend. Of course, they are going to be taking a break. So what will probably be happening is, I think if Angelo and Jacob are placing bets this week, it will be for the UFC Denver card coming up. But with all of that being said, I'll see you guys in my predictions for this card. So kicking off the card is going to be a fight at flyweight between Hadi, Omar Al-Hussaini and Ziad, Ayman, Kareem. And what I have in my notes for this fight is that it's going to be wild. In capital letters. That is because of the way that Hadi Omar does fight. Now, this guy goes out there and he is super aggressive and he is just swinging overhands. In fact, I've actually seen him at points in his fights throwing so much power into his strikes that he's actually falling over. Like, this guy is just absolutely bombing away strikes, trying to finish his opponent on the feet at any point, but he also does offensively wrestle quite a bit as well. As for Ziad, Ayman, Kareem, I couldn't really find any tape on him, so what I did do was I just went to his Instagram and watched a few Instagram reels, but from what I've seen, he's a decent boxer, but I honestly don't really know too much aside from that. So I am just going to side with the experienced fighter and the fighter that I have seen fight on against decent enough competition for a very legitimate promotion as well in UAE Warriors. And I am going to side with Hadi Omar Al-Hussaini in this fight here. Not really too confident, as I said. I couldn't find much tape on Ziad, but I do have in my notes that it is going to be a very fun fight. As for Abbas Khan fighting against Georges Aid, this fight is at 155 pounds, and Abbas Khan is not the most exciting fighter in the world to watch. He is a wrestler, and he is going to be shooting for takedowns pretty often. I have on my notes here that he has no striking whatsoever. He kind of is just a standstill guy that doesn't look confident on the feet whatsoever, to be honest with you, and he is going to be wanting to get those takedowns, especially in this matchup against Georges Aid. Now, when I did tape on Georges, I was actually very surprised by how good he was, to be honest with you. I was actually quite impressed by the boxing that he did showcase, and he is a very powerful guy. Now, he's actually a very big guy as well, and honestly, out of the two, probably could be the bigger guy, depending on whether or not he has maybe lost weight in the 2.5 years that we haven't seen him fight for. But in the time that we had seen him fight in the tape that I was watching, I was somewhat surprised by his sort of style. He does throw a lot of hooks for a striker, you know, not really a lot of straight shots, but when he does land, he does have a lot of power. He showcased decent enough takedown defense here against this guy called Oli Santalati, who was trying to wrestle, whereas Georges was trying to keep the fight on the feet. And this is probably a pretty similar stylistic matchup here. I do have here from Abbas Khan that a big plus from him is his cardio, and I believe it was this fight here against Omar Hussein where he really had to dig deep, and in the end Omar Hussein really gassed out, and we were able to see Abbas Khan take over, especially in the third round with that wrestling. I have Abbas Khan winning a decision, and the real main reason is we just haven't seen Georges fight for 2.5 years. It's hard to tell how he's going to look, and even then before then he wasn't the most active guy. So I'm kind of going to side with the activity here. I'm going to side with the wrestler over the striker in Abbas Khan, but Georges, I feel like, is probably going to be pretty live to find a knockout. But aside from that, I'm going to pick Abbas Khan to win a decision here, like the majority of Tapology have predicted. Now, Abdullah Saleem is going to be fighting against Omar Reguigui, and this is a undefeated versus undefeated matchup, and obviously somebody is going to have to lose their O. So in this matchup here, Saleem is a very tricky grappler. If you actually do watch some of his training footage that is on his Instagram account, you can see that when he does attempt takedowns, he instantly is going for submissions. I've actually seen him practicing going for a takedown and then trying to take the back immediately. You can see that he does train out of a Gracie gym, and although you can find tape on Abdullah Saleem, he hasn't really fought the best opponents, but he has managed to get submissions in most of those fights. Now, he's a grappler, and he's going to be fighting against a striker because Omar Reguigui is an undefeated Muay Thai striker, 10-0 in Muay Thai, 4-0 in MMA. He's finished most of his opponents very early on by KO as well, and once again, hasn't fought the best guys, but he is getting those knockouts in the very first round. Did lose a couple of amateur fights quite a while ago, but still undefeated when it does come to the MMA. I am going to side with Abdullah Saleem here. I feel like I can trust him to go out there and shoot for takedowns. I mean, it's definitely what he's been drilling on his Instagram. If you do have a look there, and if you do watch his fights, he definitely does show intention to get the fight down to the ground. So although he is going to be at a big striking disadvantage, I do think that I'm going to go with the grappler over the striker once again in this matchup, and I'm going to pick Abdullah Saleem to win by submission in this fight. But if he doesn't find the submission, Reguigui might be able to knock him out. Hattan Alsaif is fighting against Eman Baraka, and I have a feeling that this isn't a professional fight and will once more be a amateur fight. That is kind of what I'm thinking, because Hattan Alsaif, is going to be a girl that I think definitely could get promoted quite a lot for Saudi Arabia martial arts and the PFL in general. She is a multiple-time boxing champion in Saudi Arabia, and I believe she also has credentials in kickboxing as well, national credentials in Saudi Arabia too. She made her MMA debut fighting for the PFL against Nada Fahim from Egypt, and knocked her out really badly. Like, really, really badly, you know. You don't see that kind of knockout much at women's atomweight. For Eman Baraka, I didn't see anything. I guess I did look at her Instagram, couldn't really find much, just aside from the bunch of selfies. The fact that she turned 21 recently, which I guess is pretty cool. She has got one win on her career, but I haven't been able to find tape on that. So just once again, I'm going to have to side with Hattan Alsaif here. She probably is the girl that PFL wants to win as well, because she is from Saudi Arabia and is someone that they are trying to build. So I'm going to go with Hattan Alsaif here. I think she probably does win by KO or decision. As I did say, she is a national boxing champion in Saudi Arabia and does have other striking accolades under her belt as well. And now Omar Dafrawy will be fighting against Anthony Zeidan. And Omar Dafrawy is kind of interesting because he actually has fought quite a few of the fighters on this card, and he has actually lost to a couple of them because he went on a pretty big losing streak, a 4-fight losing streak, a little bit earlier on into his career. And if you actually do look into those fights, it is because he was getting out-wrestled. And what I have on my notes is that he's kind of like a B-level Carlos Prates, because if you can imagine how Carlos Prates fights in the UFC, with that very kind of low hands Muay Thai striking style with very good takedown defense, that's Omar Dafrawy, but not quite as impressive. Now, Omar is a very tricky striker. He's a very tricky Muay Thai striker that does fight from range quite a bit, being 6 foot tall at the weight class. And as you can see, kind of like Carlos Prates, had a bit of a losing streak, and now he's turned it back around, albeit not really against the best guys, but in these losses, they were in matchups where he was getting out-wrestled. He recently got a pretty big win over Abdullah Al-Bashiri, and in that fight, he slapped him badly, and that was a fun fight to watch as well, but that was a brutal knockout loss, and Abdullah was asleep for quite a while. Anthony Zeidan is an older guy, and what I have here is that he is a boxer. So Anthony Zeidan, he's an older guy, he's 37 years old. He's a boxer. I think I've seen him taken down a couple of times as well in these matchups that I was watching of him. This fight against Ayman Galal, I believe it was a right hand that sat him down. And I think he followed it up with ground and pounds, and the commentators did not react to it whatsoever, if I am thinking of the fight correctly when I did watch it. But I am going to side with the Muay Thai, the rangy Muay Thai striker of Omar in this matchup here. He's on a pretty good win streak right now. He's got a little bit of momentum. Zeidan could make something happen with that close range boxing that he does have, but I do like Omar to use his range in the fight. So I'm going to go with Omar in this one here. I did think he actually looked pretty good in his last fight as well. He did show some takedown defense in that one there. And he did also throw multiple knees in the clinch at that one as well. Was able to make quite a few adjustments. And then eventually the knee that got the knockout did end up landing. Amir is going to be returning to the PFL, except now under PFL MENA, fighting against Souhil Tairi. And Amir is a guy that was actually signed, I believe, to the PFL itself, and he fought against Bruno Miranda in the regular season in 2023. And what I remember seeing out of Amir is that the fact that he wants to shoot for takedowns over and over and over again, but he is not a dangerous guy whatsoever. He is a guy that wants to be very much offensively wrestling. He shoots for takedowns very regularly, and when he does get them, he dominates in top control, but doesn't really do too much with them. I have that just in my notes here that he's an aggressive wrestler with no danger, as I did say. And then I said for Souhil Tairi that he's actually very well rounded, and he is also an offensive wrestler, and then he will be the better striker in the matchup. And I thought that he looked okay against the current UFC fighter Muhammad Yahya, who, if wasn't signed to the UFC, he would probably be in the PFL MENA tournament right now. In that fight against Yahya, he actually hurt him very early on into the matchup with a strike and tried to finish him in the first round, and kind of slowed down quite a bit after that. He did shoot for takedowns against Yahya as well, and was able to find the back of Yahya at some points too, but ultimately did slow down his pace, and Yahya was able to take over in that matchup, and then he did get a knockout in his next fight. Amir, in his fight against Bruno Miranda, was just shooting takedowns over and over and over again. I think he shot like 20 takedowns or something crazy, and Miranda was able to defend them, and Bruno Miranda knocked him down a lot, like a lot. But Amir was a tough guy. He kept coming forward. Yeah, Miranda's a decent Muay Thai striker, and in that fight, I actually thought that he had shown that he had really good takedown defense, and then it turns out that other wrestlers were able to take him down. So maybe Amir isn't really as good at getting the takedowns as I maybe initially expected him to be, but I do think that against Souhil Tairi that this should be a decent enough matchup for him to at least wear down Tairi, and then maybe find the success in round number 2 and round number 3 using that takedowns and top control that he does have. So I'm going to pick Amir by decision in this fight. And now Josh Togo is going to be fighting against Mohsen Mohammadseifi, and I think this is going to be a very fun fight. Now, Josh Togo does still train out of Australian top team to my knowledge. He actually fought for Eternal MMA very recently, actually, against Jack Becker. And there was an interesting fight where Togo was trying to make things happen on the feet, and Jack Becker was more so trying to make things happen on the ground. Now, Josh Togo, I have seen in an interview somewhat recently where he was discussing boxing and leaving MMA for boxing, which is somewhat interesting because, in my opinion, Josh Togo doesn't really fight with a very heavy boxing sort of heavy style. He's got a very odd style where he is striking, but he's leaning forward quite a lot at his hips, and his hands aren't super low, but they're somewhat low, and he's kind of just throwing strikes from very awkward angles and making things very awkward for his opponents on the feet. He does have decent power, but he doesn't really have the most knockout wins in his career, and he does fight from range quite a lot, and just kind of want to emphasize that he is a very awkward striker. Mohsen Mohammadseifi is actually interesting because I think he probably is a lot better than his record does suggest. He did start 0-2 in his career and is now on a 4-fight win streak. He is very, very fun to watch, and if you actually search him up, he's got a Wikipedia page where he has actually won multiple wushu titles, which is kung fu, and multiple Asian championship wushu titles as well. And it does kind of show in his fights. Now, he is going to be a lot shorter than Togo. He is 5'8", and he is a lot smaller than most of his opponents. But the way that he does fight is with a very aggressive inside style. And he is the multiple-time wushu champion. Sorry, guys, I don't usually have notes, but because I'd never heard of these guys before, I did write a lot of notes for the fights. If you do watch his fights, they're very, very fun. I believe his fight against David Forster won some sort of Fight of the Year award for Brave CF, and that is a fun fight. So if you kind of want to see what Mohsen's all about, and you also want to watch a very fun fight, I would recommend the matchup against David Forster. In that one there, he does find a lot of success in round number 1, does get quite a few knockdowns in that matchup. matchup as well, but David Forster does manage to fight his way back into it. In this matchup, it really is probably going to be Josh Togo trying to fight from range and stay away from Mohsen, whereas Mohsen is going to be trying to close the distance, and he does throw a lot of hooks with that Kung Fu heavy style. Does throw a lot of kicks, but he is going to be a little bit shorter than Josh Togo, and honestly, from the fights that I have seen, I think Mohsen might be shorter than 5'8". Like, he's been a lot smaller than his previous opponents, and he looked way smaller than David Forster, but I guess that background in Wushu really did help him out. I'm going to go Togo to win a decision, but I think it's going to be fun because I think Mohammadseifi is really going to be pushing the action and being aggressive on the inside, so it should be a pretty intriguing matchup to watch. And now Mohammed Al-Akra will be fighting against Yusuf Abbas. And it's going to be another wrestler versus striker matchup for the most part, except we haven't seen Yusuf fight for over 2 years now. And the last time that he did fight, it was against Mateo de Clos, who is now going to be fighting for the Contender Series. And we have not seen Wabas fight since. So that's kind of interesting to see. But Yusuf, this fight was a banger. It was fun, and it was very fun. And at the end of the fight, dude, both of these guys were super rocked, and they were kind of both landing like strikes on each other while they were both trying to find their footing, and eventually it was Wabas that ended up getting the hand raised in what could maybe be argued as an early stoppage, considering Wabas was also very rocked and probably had an opportunity for De Clos to come back and land a big KO. But since then, that win has aged very well, as De Clos is now on a winning streak, and as I said, will be competing on Dana White's Contender Series at 185 pounds later on in the year. And then as for Al-Akra, the wrestler, he is a wrestler, and he needs to control the fight using that wrestling. He does train for American Kickboxing Academy according to Tapology anyway, and the way that he does win his fights is using that wrestling. He has fought very decent opponents so far. He hasn't been super active, but he does actually have that win, as I did state earlier, against Omar Al-Dafrawy, who will be fighting on the card earlier on into the card, and before that he did actually take the O of an undefeated up-and-coming fighter in his own right. In that fight against Omar, as I did say, that is how Omar loses most of his fights, is by getting out-wrestled. And that's what Al-Akra did. He out-wrestled Omar. And in this fight as well, I guess you could say it's somewhat of a similar stylistic matchup, because if you do watch the fight, Yusuf Abbas is a very tall guy, but he's very skinny as well. If this fight is at 170 pounds, he's a very slim guy for the weight class and quite tall, just like Omar is. So very similar stylistic matchup. I think that if Al-Akra can get that same sort of style going, that same sort of game plan going, he should be able to out-wrestle Al-Akra in that matchup and win a decision. Al-Akra's the pick, by decision. And as for the co-main event, it should be a pretty fun one. Badreddine Diani will be fighting against Amir Fazli, and the funniest thing about Badreddine Diani, in my opinion, is that all of his fights are from UAE Warriors, and he's actually uploaded them all to YouTube under his own channel. So I don't think he's been striked or anything, but that is how you find all of his tape. He does have a channel called Diani, so it's Badr Diani. And then as for Amir Fazli is fought very good competition. He's got very good takedown defense, and he's also got massive power. Now, the way that I watched a few of Amir Fazli's fights was somewhat interesting, because I think it was this fight here against Ahmed Sami. You can find it on YouTube, except someone has recorded it from the crowd on their phone. So that was fun to watch from that sort of point of view. And then aside from that, he has won quite a few fights earlier on into his career. But against Ahmed Sami, he does defend takedowns early, and then he goes out there and finds the KO using that striking that he does have many knockouts in the first round, actually, for him. He does have very good takedown defense as well. For Badreddine Diani has actually fought against Yusri Belgari, who, once again, if you don't know, is going to be on the Contender Series later on this year. And Yusri Belgari is a former Glory kickboxer who has fought against Alex Pereira, and now I believe he is actually one of Alex Pereira's main training partners. So it will be interesting to see how Belgari does on the Contender Series for the second year in a row. He did fight against this guy called Abdullah Al-Bushieri twice, and Abdullah Al-Bushieri was a lot taller than him. He is 6 foot tall, and Badreddine Diani was a lot shorter, so that was kind of interesting to see. And another funny thing to see as well was that Valkyrie is 6'5" and was significantly taller than him. So I am going to kind of assume that we will see Amir Fazli be the taller guy in the matchup here. Now, of course, for Diani, we have seen him lost a couple of times, but for the most part, he does manage to get the win. That was a bad take. But Badreddine Diani is a very fast kickboxer that has been taken down multiple times before. He's very quick. He's got very quick reflexes. But what I do have in my notes here is that I'm picking Fazli to win by knockout. He does have the big power. He does have good takedown defense. We've seen Diani taken down before. So I think we're going to go with the power over the speed in the matchup. And I'm going to pick Amir Fazli to win by knockout. And now we move on to the main event, which is very interesting because I want you to note this. It's at 170 pounds. Bashar Tairi recently fought at 100 kilograms. Only 3 months ago, he fought at 100 kilograms, which is 220 pounds. And he weighed in at 220 pounds for that fight. And I have in my notes, last fight was at 220 pounds with a big question mark. Big boy. Big boy. And then I have another word, which is fat. So Bashar needs to lose a little bit of weight to make 170 pounds. And I'm very interested to see if he's going to make it in this matchup, because only 3 months ago he was fighting at 100 kilograms against Mohammadseifi. And now Bashar's very interesting to me because he is a wrestler. He does have a wrestling background. And he does have a lot of wins earlier on, but these guys just were not the best competition. In fact, a lot of the competition that he's fought have not been very high level, and Tapology's actually flagged them as being ineligible matchups to go on his record, which is a little bit of a shame for him, I guess. But you can find his fight against Mohammed Hamati pretty easily on YouTube. It is pretty interesting, kind of low quality sort of imaging that you can watch it through, but you can watch it nonetheless if you really wanted to, and you'll see what I mean by just the fact that he is a little bit of a big boy, and making 170 pounds will be quite impressive. And if he does make 170 pounds, I need him to message me immediately and tell me how he did it in 3 months, because maybe I could take a page out of his book. But as for Jarrah Hussein Al-Silawi, I think that the PFL are trying to set him up for a win here. Only a few fights ago he had an 18-3 record, which would have been criminal to match him up against 4-2 Bashar Tairi, who has not fought anyone good. But although he is a very talented striker, he has lost his chin, and in the PFL that chin was unfortunately snatched away from him. Magomed Umalatov was the first to snatch the chin of Jarrah, and then he got voice crack at the very end of the video. Fantastic. And then he got slept by Sadabu Sai, who wasn't knocking anyone out at this point. And then he got knocked out by Solomon Renfro. You know, and Solomon Renfro is a very powerful Muay Thai guy, but, you know, we're going from beating pretty decent guys like Ismail Nurdiev and Abduragimov, by the way, who is now also in the PFL, to getting knocked out by Solomon Renfro, and that wasn't really a good look kind of to see. He is a former Brave champion as well, once again fighting much better competitions than Bashar Tairi, and if he does still have any sort of chin left at all, he should be able to win this fight relatively easily. When the PFL announced that they were going to be re-signing him for the PFL MENA event and the PFL MENA tournament, they made a massive deal about it, so I believe that they're going to try and make Jarrah Hussein Al-Silawi their like poster boy of sorts, and I think that a good way to start is probably by fighting Tairi, who was fighting at 220 pounds 3 months ago, by the way. If Hussein Al-Silawi can keep it on the feet, I think he should be able to find a knockout. He is a very talented guy. It is just a shame that he has lost that chin, and literally in my notes I have, it's a setup for their main guy. So it's a setup for Jarrah to win, pretty much, is kind of how I see it. And I do think Jarrah Hussein Al-Silawi should be able to find that knockout, but there are quite a few guys kind of expecting Tairi to maybe catch that chin, which has been taken away. Let me know what you think of this card overall. Hopefully I made it sound exciting, because I am actually very much looking forward to it, especially quite a few of these matchups here, where I do think guys are really going to throw down and put on some very exciting matchups. But let me know what you think of these guys, and I will see you guys in the next video.